I think at some point or another, everyone has had that phase where they were obsessed with Nintendo games, and specifically that of the Super Mario Bros. I remember being 6 years old and getting my first Nintendo DS and Nintendo Wii, and gaining access to all of the games that were basically going to shape my entire childhood, and leave me with extremely fond memories of a simpler time where my main concerns in life were gaining access to the secret pipes which would catapult me an extra 2 worlds ahead, or winning my first 150cc gold trophy. Every once in a while, I'll revisit them and refresh my knowledge and skills to see if I'm as good as I used to be, and while doing this a few times over has taught me that my gaming abilities basically peaked when I was 8 years old. It's nice to revisit them and feel the nostalgia when I don't have much else to do, and whenever I feel like the time is right. Anyway, when I heard the announcement last year that they were making an animated Mario Bros movie, a few thoughts crossed my mind. 1. They're trying this again. 2. How will the animation turn out? And 3. Chris Pratt is playing Mario. Needless to say, while I was excited at the prospect, a lot of concerns began spiraling through my head, and it was only when the trailer dropped that the casting made more sense, and any previous worries I had about the animation and how it would turn out were demolished altogether. It looked like a blast, something fun, nostalgic, colourful, and probably quite silly, but there seemed like a real possibility that this film would deliver and make for a great experience on the big screen. And well, after seeing the movie just last night at the time of writing this, and giving myself some time to think on it, I came to the conclusion that if I'm going to talk about it, I need to shift my perspective and keep in mind that this is more of a kids movie and see it through the eyes of my 12-year-old self, and in doing so, I can say that this movie is basically exactly what I expected, and not in a bad way at all. While it's by no means perfect, it's still a really fun movie that's fast-paced, goofy, nostalgic, and basically goes through every colour palette imaginable, and takes you through basically everything that you'd want to see in a film of this fashion. There's fun Easter eggs and plot elements around every corner, lots of challenges and obstacles for the characters to overcome, and the animation is done to a T. And of course, with such a short runtime, the film is very fast-paced, and introduces you to the brothers in a very quick fashion, and the same goes for basically everyone else. The movie somewhat assumes that you kind of already know your stuff, and that you don't need a grand introduction to all these characters again, but regardless, you don't need to be a fan of the material to enjoy this movie, or get invested into the story, but of course, if you are, it makes the experience that much better. From the power-ups to the school cubers that put themselves back together, to Rainbow Road, everything fun and creative about the games is jam-packed into this crazy adventure, and it's just a delight to see all of this stuff brought to the big screen in what's been a project long overdue. I mean, the story is really interesting, taking the old-fashioned approach of making the brothers just regular plumbers from the real world, and sending them through a portal into the Mushroom Kingdom. Not really sure what other approach they could have taken, to be fair, and I know that this has always been the idea of how they entered the Mushroom Land, but seeing it in action was really enjoyable, and sticking with the idea that these guys are just 2 plumbers from the real world with big ambition and desire who are brought on this crazy adventure makes it all the more easier to get invested into their characters and even relate to the simple struggles that they have, such as bonding with their parents or trying to take their business off the ground. And really, this story is just a greatly exaggerated version of going through hard times to realise what you're capable of, and attributing this newfound mindset to other endeavours, proving the doubters wrong, and making your dreams a reality. Anyway, let's touch on the characters and cast, because when you're making a movie of this calibre, you want the best people for the role, and what I will say is, they didn't disappoint. I mean, Chris Pratt as Mario had everyone raising an eyebrow at one point or another, but with the story that they ran with, the casting worked out much better than I think anyone expected. The man is great in the role, and Mario in this movie is a delightful character to watch. I won't lie, I was concerned that they were going to make this guy seem too dumb or powerless, to take seriously, but when he starts to come into his own, utilise the power-ups and gain confidence, and then seeing his journey of being brought into this crazy world and committing himself to doing what's right, and protecting those that he loves without fear, really made the guy someone to root for. And yeah man, it's fucking Super Mario, what can I say? I mean, the whole cast is fantastic, and they were great picks for their respective roles. Charlie Day as Luigi, Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong, Jack Black as Bowser. There's really nothing bad that I can say about any of these castings after seeing the movie. I mean, to be fair, Bowser as a character was obviously made into something much more silly and laughable than what we're used to, but it worked in the context that they went with, and considering that Peach this time around isn't being constantly captured by him for basically no good reason, and instead he just wants to marry her so that they can rule the world together, kind of makes you feel for the guy that he doesn't have any, real love in his life, and the only path that he sees to living a happy life is to capture what's basically the only female in the kingdom and force her into marriage. I'm not saying I support his actions, but it kind of makes you, want to explore this guy deeper and dive more into his past. Now, let's talk about Princess Peach, because if you played the games, you know that this movie took a very different approach to the character rather than the damsel in distress, which studios are very much opposed to nowadays. Because in this movie, she's in her big castle, happily living among all of the toads of the kingdom, and her role and what she's trying to achieve, even before Mario comes into play, is to stop Bowser from taking over all of the Mushroom Kingdom. And while I do think that this change was done somewhat because, you know, Hollywood, the change in storyline was actually quite refreshing, and I'm actually glad that they changed it up a bit and gave her a bigger role to play than just someone he's captured over and over again. And sure, she is a bit of a Mary Sue, but for this story where they're not hopping from world to world, the approach that they went with made a lot more sense, and apart from the training sequence, she never really overshadows Mario and takes away from it being, you know, very much his story, especially towards the end. And Anya Taylor-Joy, who's one of my favourite actresses, is great as always. Anyway, as I said at the beginning, this movie is not perfect by any means, and there's some issues that I had, specifically that of the pacing. The story just moved way too fast for my liking, and every second it just felt like the story just had to keep moving as to not bore the audience. An extra 20 minutes or so would have been nice to just flesh out the world building and characters a bit more as the journey took off, and give Mario and Luigi more time to adjust to this crazy new world that they've just entered. However, I know it's more of a kids movie, and the animation is obviously definitely no easy task, but even if you look at The Incredibles, arguably, you know, the best kids animated movie of all time, that was just shy of 2 hours, so I think I'm allowed to be critical here. To be honest though, I think part of my criticism stems from the fact that I just really wanted to see more of the world and be part of it longer, because the animation and all of the details surrounding Mushroom Kingdom was just such a sight to see. I could have literally sat there for the entire duration and just watched how their entire society functions, and I still would have had a great time. So, that's my thoughts on the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and if you haven't seen it already, I'd recommend that you give it a watch, especially if you're a fan of the Mario franchise, because there really is so much to love about this movie, and if you have any kids especially, taking them to see this really is a no-brainer. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video, like, subscribe, all that jazz, won't force you though, and I will see you in the next one very, very soon.